You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, we have some bombshell news here from the New York Times about the former acting attorney general, Emile Beauvais, who is right now a nominee for the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. Can you explain what this report outlined that Emile Beauvais, when he was the acting attorney general, ordered the Department of Justice to do?
Yeah, Brian, bombshell is exactly the right description of this one. So there is a DOJ lawyer named Erez Ruvini who was in court in the Abrego Garcia case, and what he just disclosed to the Inspector General at the Department of Justice and to the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is about to take up Emile Beauvais' nomination to the Third Circuit Federal Court of Appeals. He authored this 27-page letter and laid out how Emile Beauvais told people that they were going to have to violate court orders and deport people regardless of what the federal court said about whether they could do it. I mean, this is really dramatic stuff, and it looks like Mr. Ruvini has the goods to back it up. There are other witnesses. The New York Times reporting references, emails and text messages. And just so I completely accurately characterize the allegation being made by Mr. Ruvini, and he made it formally through his lawyers as a whistleblower, mind you. Here is just a little bit of the New York Times reporting. It says, Mr. Beauvais, who I should remind people was Donald Trump's criminal defense attorney before Donald Trump was elected, and Emile Beauvais is the one who went into federal court in New York and told the judge that they want to dismiss Mayor Eric Adams' criminal case, not because Eric Adams didn't commit all kinds of public corruption crimes, but because they want Eric Adams to do political favors for Donald Trump, in essence. That's a quid pro quo, and that is sharply unethical conduct. Yes, that Emile Beauvais. The reporting is Beauvais stressed to all who were in attendance in a meeting involving these deportation matters that the planes needed to take off no matter what. And Mr. Beauvais said, that the possibility that a court order would enjoin, would stop those removals before they could be effectuated. Beauvais said DOJ would need to consider telling the courts, quote, fuck you, and ignore any such court orders. Mr. Ruvini perceived that others in the room looked stunned, and he observed awkward, nervous glances among people in the room. Silence overtook the room. Now, Mr. Ruvini is the one who went into court and honestly, truthfully, candidly, as he is required to do by the Code of Ethical Conducts for DOJ lawyers, he said that Abrego Garcia was mistakenly deported to El Salvador. And the Trump administration didn't like that. It was a sign of weakness in their estimation, even though it was the truth. And they basically ordered him to retract it. And in this 27-page letter, he says they wanted me to go into court and lie or put a lie in writing in a court filing. And I wasn't going to do that. So, of course, he was immediately fired. But he's not going to take it lying down. He has now provided all of this information to the Inspector General for the Department of Justice, who investigates, internal wrongdoing at DOJ. Fortunately, it's a long-serving IG, Inspector General Horowitz, who I think can be relied upon to give this one an honest look. And he also provided it to the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is about to take up the nomination of Emile Beauvais to the Federal Court of Appeals.
So it would be bad enough, it would be disqualifying enough if you had the acting deputy attorney general, like one of the highest law enforcement officials in the United States of America, basically coming out and telling the courts, fuck you, ignore any order that doesn't comport with our political agenda. But then layered on top of that is the fact that this guy, Emile Beauvais, is now a nominee for a federal circuit court. And so what do you make of the fact that this is somebody who might be on the very courts that he was telling his underlings that they should basically just ignore?
Brian, let me go out on a limb here and say that you're probably not well suited to be a federal judge if, as a high DOJ official, you're telling your subordinates, fuck federal court orders, we'll defy them if Donald Trump wants us to and wants us to unlawfully deport people.
what's the point of even being a federal judge if you yourself are undermining the very credibility of those judges' orders that are being handed down? Like, aren't you just basically telling people that whatever ruling I as a judge might hand down, if it doesn't comport with your political ideology, you just say fuck it?
Yeah, interestingly, it kind of feels like in keeping with Donald Trump's cabinet nominees, right? People who are entirely ill-equipped for the positions that Donald Trump nominates them to. You know, you want to be you want to dismantle the Department of Education. I'm going to, make you the head of the Department of Education. Right. You are somebody who is ill-equipped to be the Secretary of Defense, for gosh sakes, Pete Hegseth. Well, it feels like more of the same. Somebody who says fuck federal court orders is going to be a federal court judge?
This is a political question here, but do you presume that we're going to have any semblance of a spine from these Republican senators when it comes time for their advice and consent responsibilities, for them to recognize that this is somebody who has not just a lack of respect, but such glaring disdain for the judiciary that these are the kind of things he would say to those beneath him at the DOJ? Do you think any of these Republican senators are going to be moved by that? Or is it just that, Trump says jump, they say how high?
Brian, hope springs eternal. So here's the example I'm going to point to that gives me at least a glimmer of hope. Ed Stop the Steal Martin was named by Donald Trump to be the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia, my old professional home. He was going to be the top prosecutor in all of Washington, D.C. And he had done so many things that were a gross abuse of his position and of prosecutorial powers that when his nomination went to the Senate Judiciary Committee, it didn't even make it out of committee. Yeah. And it looks like one or more Republicans, held the line and said, no, this is a bridge too far. Boy, it sure feels to me like Emile Bove is a bridge too far in a similar way, and maybe even a worse example, because a U.S. attorney who's appointed by the president typically only serves for the term of that president, whereas a federal judge, whether trial court or appeals court or Supreme Court justice, they serve for life. Think about all the damage a lawless hack like Emile Bove can do on the federal bench for life.
And so what would your message be to those, Republicans who had enough reason, whatever that reason might be, to refuse to vote out Ed Martin out of the Judiciary Committee as they look forward to deciding whether or not to do the same with Emile Bove?
Think about the oath you took, your oath of allegiance to the Constitution. Think about the need for a competent, qualified, honest, ethical, federal judiciary. Do right by your constituents, do right by the American people, and don't put a lawless hack, somebody who said fuck federal court orders, on the federal court, because, that's a lose-lose. And I know you're scared to death to defy dear leader, but there comes a time when, you have to search inside you and find just a little kernel of principle and then act on that principle.
That's a tall order, telling these Republicans in the U.S. Senate to find a kernel of principle. I'm sure you get plenty of these Republican senators to be like, "Oh, challenge accepted." If you think that I'm not willing to do exactly that, you may be mistaken, sir. Well, we will, of course, stay on top of this as this nomination continues to move through. We'll cover this one in particular because, again, we cannot overstate the danger of having somebody like Emile Bove on the federal judiciary, not just for some temporary term, as was the case when he was the Deputy Attorney General, but for life, because that's what this term would be. And so just like we see someone like Judge Cannon and the damage that she could bring to the judiciary, having more people like her who are just so egregiously partisan, who basically just exist to serve as an extension of Donald Trump and the worst impulses of the MAGA GOP. Obviously, that can come back and bite anybody who's in the pro-democracy faction for the rest of his life, as long as he serves on the judiciary. So we will stay on top of this. For those who are watching, if you want to follow along, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on this screen. It's the best way to support our work and the best way to support independent media more broadly. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.